The camera opens on a glittering skyline at night, skyscrapers glowing with wealth and ambition. In the heart of the city, behind tinted glass windows, two men clink crystal glasses of champagne. Their names are Daniel Mercer and Victor Hale. To the outside world, they are visionaries, young financiers who cracked the code of Wall Street. But behind those smiles lies the seed of crime that will shake the very foundation of trust. Daniel, sharp-suited and articulate, came from nothing. He clawed his way through the financial sector, always hungry, always calculating. Beside him, Victor was the opposite, charming, magnetic, with the gift of persuasion. If Daniel built the engine, Victor sold the dream. Together, they were unstoppable. Their company, Mercer Hale Capital, began as a boutique investment firm. It promised ordinary investors a chance at extraordinary returns. The pitch was simple. We know the secrets the big banks don't want you to know. Ordinary people bought in, retirees, small business owners, even churches. Money poured in faster than they ever imagined. At first, the profits were real. Daniel's insider tips and aggressive trading strategies paid off. Victor's charisma brought in more clients. But markets are unpredictable, and greed has no patience. When a bad quarter threatened to unravel their empire, Daniel suggested a dangerous fix: falsify the reports. No one would ever know, he argued. It would buy them time. Victor hesitated. For a moment, his conscience whispered. But the image of luxury, the penthouse, the cars, the adoration, was too intoxicating. He nodded, and that was the moment Mercer and Hale crossed the line from brilliance to crime. The falsified statements worked like magic. Clients believed their money was multiplying. Even when it wasn't, more investors joined, lured by promises of impossible returns. Daniel crafted spreadsheets so flawless that even auditors were fooled. Victor played the role of financial prophet. Dazzling rooms full of wealthy prospects with charm and fabricated success stories. Behind the curtain, though, the company was bleeding. Instead of investing all the funds, they began using new money to pay returns to old investors. It was a classic Ponzi scheme. Hidden beneath the glamour of legitimate trading, the duo's lifestyle exploded. Lavish mansions, private jets, designer suits, art collections. Every whim satisfied. To the media, they were the embodiment of the American dream. But to themselves, they were running on borrowed time. Daniel grew obsessed with control. He spent sleepless nights monitoring spreadsheets, moving money between shell accounts, bribing compliance officers. Victor, meanwhile, grew drunk on attention, basking in television interviews and rubbing shoulders with politicians. The balance between them began to shift. Daniel the paranoid genius, Victor the reckless showman. One evening, as they celebrated another quarter of record profits, Victor leaned back and laughed. "You know, Danny, we could keep this going forever. People believe what they want to believe." Daniel's eyes narrowed. Forever, he thought, was a dangerous word. In the background, a whisper of danger was already forming. A junior analyst at the Securities and Exchange Commission had noticed irregularities in Mercer and Hale's filings. The numbers didn't quite add up, but in a world drowning in paperwork and political distractions, her voice was just a faint echo for now. Meanwhile, cracks began to show in the partnership. Daniel resented Victor's flamboyance, the way he courted fame while Daniel carried the burden of hiding the fraud. Victor, on the other hand, felt trapped by Daniel's obsession with secrecy and control. Their empire was built together, but greed was beginning to turn them against each other. One night, as Victor left the gala, a journalist cornered him with a simple question: "How exactly are you making 20% returns in a volatile market?" Victor laughed it off, but for the first time, doubt flickered in the eyes of those watching. That seed of suspicion would soon grow into something uncontrollable. Back at their office, Daniel slammed a stack of reports onto Victor's desk. "You're getting sloppy," he hissed. "The more you talk, the closer we are to ruin." Victor smirked. "Relax, Danny. People worship us. No one questions gods." But Daniel's gut told him the clock was ticking. And in the quiet hours of night, when the champagne was gone and the city outside slept, Daniel stared at the numbers that no longer made sense. The scheme had grown too big, too fast. They couldn't stop now, but the walls were beginning to close in. A storm gathered over the city one humid afternoon, and inside Mercer and Hale's glass tower, Daniel studied the ledgers with an expression carved from stone. The numbers told a story he could no longer bend. The incoming investments weren't keeping pace with the payouts. Unless they found new money, the entire illusion would collapse. Victor breezed into the office, silk tie loose, glass of scotch in hand. "You worry too much," he said, scanning the charts with casual disinterest. Daniel's voice was low, controlled. "We're at the edge. One wrong move, one missed payout, and everything falls apart." But Victor only grinned, as though chaos itself were a game he could charm his way through. Their solution came in the form of a wealthy foreign investor, a billionaire with a reputation for ruthless deals. Victor assured Daniel he could secure the money, that all it would take was his silver tongue. Daniel warned that courting such a man was dangerous, but desperation outweighed caution. The meeting was held in a private suite at the Ritz. Victor spun his story with flawless confidence, promising returns that defied logic. The billionaire, intrigued but cautious, agreed to invest on one condition: quarterly audits by his own team. Daniel's stomach clenched, but Victor shook the man's hand with radiant charm. That night, as Victor celebrated with champagne and models, Daniel locked himself in his office. He worked feverishly to prepare a labyrinth of forged documents that could withstand scrutiny. The more he built the lie, the more he realized this was no longer about profits. It was survival. Weeks passed, and the billionaire's money poured fuel onto the fire. With the new capital, Mercer and Hale expanded. Flashier offices, bigger parties, global recognition. But Daniel's paranoia grew. He installed encrypted servers, fired staff who asked too many questions, and monitored Victor's every move. Trust, once their bond, had become a fragile thread. In the shadows, the SEC analyst continued her quiet investigation. Every late night she spent poring over their filings, uncovered small inconsistencies, mismatched dates, returns that seemed mathematically impossible. She flagged her concerns to her supervisor, only to be told, "They're too big, too connected. Let it go." But she didn't. Inside Mercer and Hale, the partnership rotted. Daniel accused Victor of carelessness. Victor accused Daniel of paranoia. Heated arguments spilled into boardrooms, their voices echoing against marble walls. Yet to the world, they remained untouchable, two titans smiling on magazine covers. Victor began keeping secrets of his own. Unknown to Daniel, he siphoned millions into offshore accounts under false names. He told himself it was a safety net, but deep down, he knew it was betrayal waiting for the right moment. One evening, Daniel discovered discrepancy in the offshore transfers. Confronting Victor, he demanded answers. Victor laughed, brushing it off as diversification. But Daniel's eyes burned with fury. He realized, for the first time, that his partner was not just reckless. He was planning an escape. Meanwhile, the billionaire's auditors arrived unannounced. Daniel's heart pounded as they examined stacks of fabricated reports. For hours, he guided them through doctored ledgers, false trades, and digital illusions. When they left, apparently satisfied, Victor threw his arm around Daniel. "See? We're untouchable." But Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that it was only a matter of time. Behind closed doors, the SEC analyst finally connected with a whistleblower, a former Mercer and Hale accountant who had grown uneasy with the lies. Together, they pieced together a trail of fabricated trades. The evidence was still circumstantial, but it was enough to warrant a deeper probe. The empire grew heavier on Daniel's shoulders. Sleepless nights, endless forgeries, bribes of regulators. He bore the burden alone while Victor lived like a king. The resentment curdled into something darker. He began to imagine a world where Victor no longer existed. Victor, for his part, was plotting too. He knew the scheme wouldn't last forever, and he wasn't about to sink with the ship. Secret meetings with lawyers and bankers filled his calendar. He spoke of loyalty in public, but in private, he was crafting an exit plan that would leave Daniel to take the fall. The betrayal surfaced one night in whispers. A trusted assistant slipped Daniel a folder of confidential documents Victor had signed without his knowledge. Documents transferring vast assets overseas. Daniel stared at the papers, his jaw tightening. His partner, his brother-in-arms, were preparing to abandon him. That night, Daniel sat alone in his penthouse, city lights glittering beyond the glass. He poured a drink, staring into the amber liquid. "If he betrays me, I'll destroy him first," he muttered. The game had changed. No longer partners. They were predators circling each other in the dark. The sun rose over the city, but inside Mercer and Hale, the atmosphere was suffocating. Daniel and Victor stood on opposite sides of the boardroom, silent but seething. Their empire had never looked stronger for the outside, but behind closed doors, it teetered on the brink of destruction. Daniel's phone buzzed with a message from a private investigator he had secretly hired, evidence confirming Victor's offshore accounts and hidden transfers. Betrayal was no longer a suspicion. It was fact. His partner was preparing to vanish with billions. Meanwhile, Victor met discreetly with a high-powered attorney, laying out his escape strategy. The plan was simple. Shift blame onto Daniel, claim ignorance of the forgeries, and walk away with a fortune. To Victor, loyalty was a luxury. Survival was the only currency. At the same time, the SEC analyst's persistence finally paid off. She convinced a federal prosecutor to open a formal investigation. Subpoenas were drafted, agents prepared, and Mercer and Hale's glossy empire was about to be cracked open. The first sign of trouble came when an investor demanded to withdraw $20 million. Normally, the firm would cover it with new money, but inflows had slowed. Daniel scrambled, moving funds between accounts, while Victor brushed it off. "We'll find another whale," he said. But the request had already triggered whispers among other investors. As news spread, more withdrawal requests flooded in. The delicate machinery of the Ponzi scheme began to grind and stutter. Daniel worked frantically to hold it together, but the dam had begun to crack. One night, Daniel confronted Victor in his penthouse. Documents were spread across the table. Proof of Victor's secret transfers. "You're planning to leave me holding the bag," Daniel accused. Victor smirked, sipping his drink. "It's not personal, Danny. It's survival." The words hit Daniel like a knife. Years of partnership, of shared lies and victories, reduced to betrayal. His fists clenched, but Victor only laughed, mocking his desperation. In that moment, Daniel realized the man across from him wasn't his partner anymore. He was his enemy. The next morning, federal agents raided Mercer and Hale's headquarters. Doors burst open, computers were seized, employees questioned. Daniel watched in fury as Victor played the role of the innocent showman, telling investigators he had no idea what was happening. The billionaire investor arrived, demanding answers. When the truth began to surface, his rage was volcanic. "You lied to me," he thundered, slamming his fist on the polished table. Daniel tried to explain, but Victor stepped in with crocodile tears, painting himself as a victim of Daniel's schemes. The betrayal was complete. The media caught fire. Headlines screamed of fraud, embezzlement, and betrayal at the highest levels. Television screens flashed images of Daniel being escorted by agents, while Victor appeared in tailored suits, proclaiming his innocence on primetime interviews. But Victor's confidence was misplaced. The SEC analyst, relentless and precise, uncovered his offshore accounts and traced the hidden transfers back to him. What began as Daniel's downfall quickly expanded into Victor's noose. As the evidence mounted, prosecutors circled like sharks. Daniel, trapped and betrayed, faced a choice: go down alone or take Victor with him. His fury burned into cold resolve. If he was going to fall, he would drag his partner into the abyss. In a sterile interrogation room, Daniel leaned forward, voice calm but venomous. "You want Victor Hale? I'll give him to you." He began to unravel the empire, detail by detail, naming names, exposing the offshore accounts, and showing where the bodies were buried. Victor, blindsided, watched his carefully crafted image implode. The same charm that once dazzled investors now looked like deceit in the eyes of jurors. His betrayal had bought him nothing but a faster, harder fall. The trial became a spectacle, broadcast across every major network. Prosecutors painted them as modern-day villains, symbols of greed and corruption. Investors wept in the gallery, their life savings gone, families broken, futures destroyed, all for the luxury of two men who thought they could outsmart the system. Victor tried to turn on Daniel, claiming he was just a salesman, a pawn in Daniel's grand scheme. But Daniel's testimony, backed by hard evidence, crushed his defense. The betrayal that once threatened to save Victor now sealed his fate. When the verdict came, it was merciless. Both men were found guilty of fraud, embezzlement, insider trading, and running one of the largest Ponzi schemes in modern history. As the judge delivered decades-long sentences, the courtroom erupted. Justice for some, but ashes for many. In separate prison cells, Daniel and Victor sat alone, their empires gone, their fortunes seized, their names forever cursed. Two men who once toasted their brilliance, now reduced to shadows behind bars. The iron door clanged shut behind Daniel Mercer, and silence swallowed him whole. The man who once controlled billions now slept on a thin mattress in a concrete cell. The luxury suits were gone, replaced by a number stitched into rough prison fabric. Across the prison yard, Victor Hale walked with swagger he no longer deserved. Even behind bars, he tried to play the role of the charmer, telling stories to fellow inmates as though they were investors. But here, his charm was worth nothing. Respect had to be earned differently. The two men never spoke again. Their friendship, their empire, their shared lies, it all dissolved into silence and hatred. Each blamed the other for their downfall, and each vowed never to forgive. Outside the prison walls, the damage was catastrophic. Thousands of investors were ruined, retirements lost, homes foreclosed, children's college funds wiped out. The ripple effect of Mercer and Hale's greed destroyed lives far beyond the glittering offices they once ruled. In a small suburban home, an elderly couple sat at their kitchen table, staring at an empty bank statement. They had trusted Mercer and Hale with everything. Now, they had nothing but the weight of betrayal. In another city, a single mother worked double shifts, the savings she invested in the firm gone forever. She clipped coupons, counted pennies, and cursed the names of men who had stolen her future. The SEC analyst, who had fought for years to expose the scheme, sat in her modest office. For her, victory was bittersweet. She had brought down titans, but she knew justice could never truly repay the victims. In prison, Daniel retreated into himself. Days blurred into nights. He spent hours scribbling numbers on scraps of paper, as though solving equations could bring him peace. The obsession that built his empire now consumed him in silence. Victor, however, played a different game. He manipulated weaker inmates, traded favors, and carved out a semblance of power. But behind bravado was fear. He knew that in this world, betrayal had a price. One cold night, Victor received a message smuggled into his cell. A reminder that the billionaire he had once deceived still had reached far beyond prison walls. For the first time, Victor's hands trembled. Even in captivity, his past was hunting him. Daniel, in his isolation, began to write a memoir. Page after page, he recounted the rise and fall of Mercer and Hale, not as a confession, but as a warning. Yet every word dripped with bitterness toward Victor, the man he still considered the true betrayer. Months turned into years, and their empire became legend. Business schools dissected their fraud, documentaries told their story, and their names became synonymous with greed and betrayal. They had wanted to be remembered as financial geniuses. Instead, they became cautionary tales. One day in the prison yard, Victor was attacked by two inmates. It was quick, brutal, and left him bloodied on the concrete. As guards rushed in, Daniel watched from across the yard, expressionless. Their story had begun with champagne. Now it was ending in silence and blood. Victor survived the attack, but he was never the same. His swagger vanished, replaced by paranoia. Every shadow looked like a threat. Every laugh sounded like mockery. For the first time, Victor Hale understood fear. Years later, Daniel received a letter in his cell. It bore no return address, only a single sentence. "You were never the genius. You were just my pawn." The handwriting was unmistakable, Victor's, even broken and hunted. The betrayal still burned. Daniel tore the letter to pieces, but the words lingered in his mind. At night, he replayed their empire's rise and fall, wondering if perhaps Victor had been right all along. Maybe he had been the pawn. In the end, both men faded into obscurity. The world moved on. New scandals replaced their names in the headlines, and new criminals rose to repeat the cycle of greed. But for the victims, the scars never healed. And somewhere in the city they once ruled, a new firm rose, promising ordinary investors extraordinary returns. The logo was different, the faces were new, but the game was the same. History, it seemed, was destined to repeat itself. The final shot lingers on a wall of framed photographs. Families, retirees, children, smiling before their lives were destroyed by two men who believed they could cheat the world. The images fade to black, leaving only one question for the audience. Would you have trusted them too? Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and share it with your friends so they can enjoy it too.